Okay, Troy, we're going to go ahead and get started. Can we go around one more time? I think there were a couple of more logins. And I'd just like to make sure we know who's on the line, if that's possible.
Yeah, we'll just start over here introducing ourselves.
Billy Holmes, construction manager, or construction management, project manager.
Mel Mulder, administrator, construction management.
Tanner Norton, general services, facility manager.
Brian Scranton, project manager, construction management.
Charlie Kaufman, planning.
And Troy Decker, planning.
Amber Leach, planning.
So that's it here, Bill.
Okay, great. And for others on the line, if you wouldn't mind just one more introduction.
This is Todd Martin, warden at the Wyoming Honor Conservation Camp in Newcastle.
Major Ethan Remack and Deputy Warden Michael Harlow from the Wyoming State Penitentiary.
John Cole, Thomas Lauer from WMCI.
Wyoming State Hospital with Byron Harmon and Paul Mullinex.
Okay, has anyone else not introduced themselves? All right, well, we will go ahead and get started. This is Bill Small at FEA. Thank you for joining us. We will go through and describe what's going to happen over the next couple of months. Sarah Johnson is with me. She'll walk through the specifics of this. If you have any questions as we go, feel free to speak up and we'll try and answer as we go. We will have a Q&A at the end for those of you who remain through and have questions remaining. And that's it for introduction. So again, thank you for joining us. I'll turn it over to Sarah and again, ask as we go if it helps you. Thank you.
All right. As Bill said, thank you for taking time to join us today for this webinar. We'll go through and talk about the background of the project and the purpose, as well as the scope of the project for both the facility condition assessments and the space measurement process. We'll also go over the expectations for agencies, that is before we go out into the field, what we expect during field work and after field work for the data review process. We'll go over the schedule and the methodology review for as much time as we have, and as Bill said, we'll have time for some questions at the end. As for background, in 2015, FEA completed condition and uniform standards assessments for about 320 Wyoming state buildings, and that was actually through the Department of Administration and Information. And we've also used a similar methodology for the Wyoming School Facilities Department since 2006. We also use this methodology for a lot of other institutions across the country. The purpose of this additional work is to include 20 buildings into the state facility condition database network. And the purpose of this webinar is just to give everyone kind of an idea of what the process is and what it's going to look like for the agencies as we go through the facility condition assessment effort. As for the scope of work, there's two parts that the agencies will really see. There's the space measurement effort, which will involve a team of 2 of our assessors in the field, and they'll be measuring and classifying all interior spaces of the building. And the facility condition assessments will be one assessor, and they'll be looking at all the elements of the building, that is substructure, shell, interiors, mechanical, electrical, and plumbing, fire protection, the equipment and furnishings, special construction and site systems. So one thing that's really important to notice is that those are going to be two separate site visits, and we actually do that intentionally to try and limit the requirements of your staff on site to make it a little bit easier, so we're not requiring two escorts at a time, just one. This is just a little overview of where we'll be heading. Some agencies have sites in multiple locations, and there's some locations where we'll be working with multiple agencies.
Hey, Sarah.
But we'll be traveling. Yeah?
I apologize for interrupting you. The prison, those at the prison can't hear you at all, the personnel there. Could you type in again on your chat there the 188 number for them to call in, please?
Yeah, absolutely.
Is it not showing up in the chat now, Troy? Because it's still showing in the chat.
We are not.
We're not seeing it at all,
We're
actually.
not seeing.
Are you not seeing the screen, the presentation screen?
Yeah, we're seeing the presentation screen, but we're not seeing anything in the chat
box is
the chat box.
Can you bring up the chat box and see if it'll show up now?
To the right in the. I don't know.
Hard to say how they said it broke
I
up.
wonder.
Yes, it is 1888.
Okay, I'm going to type it for you here.
311.
Okay.
8128.
8128. Okay, and then what?
Code number 728 088.
728
888.
0888.
Yep, 7455.
7455. Got it.
Okay.
So let's give it just a second here, guys. Sorry to postpone you, but see if we can get it.
No. I want to make sure people are hearing it.
Okay, it looks like Jason did just get in, right? That was
Yes.
who was asking?
Yeah.
So we ready? Think we're good?
No. I'm not sure if any of the others ask if the other, they tell them we can hear the WSP. People say they can hear it, but how about the other prisons?
Okay, I'll just basically, okay, so Jason, you're on your own over there. Okay, thank you. Okay, Mark, thank you. Anybody else out there that does not hear, if you could type in, just let us know in the chat. As you call in on the number, you can listen on the phone, but watch on the screen. So we'll give you just a couple more seconds here. If anybody else can't hear, please type and let us know. We'll make sure we get you in. Okay. So, Bill, I don't see anybody else saying they don't have audio, so I think we can go forward. Thank you.
All right, no problem. So you can go. From your slideshow. You can say start from current slide.
I'm re-emailing everybody. Terry has.
Okay, we'll continue.
All right, so
Hello?
as I was,
Yes, hello? Who just joined?
This is Dan Shannon with the DOC. Yeah, this is Terry Keys with DOC. We was on hold on the other line and never could get through.
Okay. Well, thank you for joining. We're really just getting started. We had a couple of technical challenges here. So thanks for joining. You'll get the gist of this.
Yes, sir. There's some others from DOC will be calling in too. We just used the number on the invitation and we was all parked on hold.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Okay, so this map just kind of shows the 20 facilities that we'll be going to in this effort and where they're located at across the state. As for expectations for the agencies prior to the field work, we requested a couple different types of documents from each of the agencies where we will be going to facilities, and that included floor plans and building questionnaires, and we'll get to that in a little bit more detail in just a second. And then we also ask that you attend this refresher webinar, so we really appreciate those of you that have attended, and if there's anyone that hasn't been able to attend, we really encourage them to listen to this webinar after the fact for just a little bit more information. The requested documents, we really appreciate your guys' cooperation with the State Department to get us the questionnaires and the floor plans. I believe we got questionnaires for every facility, which is really great, and we really appreciate that. And we got, I think, all the available floor plans. There were a couple smaller buildings that didn't get floor plans, so just so you know, we'll probably try and work with whoever's on site to get floor plans if there's any on site, and we'll work with what we have to the best of our ability. And the questionnaires are really helpful for the assessors while they're in the field for making sure they capture all the building elements, and it gives the assessor kind of an idea of what they'll be looking at when they get to each facility. During the field work, we need a little bit of help from the agencies as far as gaining access to all of the spaces. For the space measurement work, as I mentioned, there'll be a team of 2 assessors, and they'll be recording measurements and classifications for all of the interior space. So from the agency, it would be really helpful if there was someone available to grant access to all spaces, including mechanical rooms and custodial closets, but they don't necessarily have to be familiar with all of the building operations, management. And then during the FCA field work, they'll be also trying to look at all the interior spaces, but also the roof systems and some more of the site systems. And we really request an expert for the FCA work that is really familiar with the building. Ideally, it would be the person that also filled out the questionnaire if they're available. And if they're really familiar with operations and maintenance practices, it's really helpful for us to gain as much insight as possible while we're on site. After the field work, we will ask that the agencies review both the space measurement location data and the FCA data. And what that will look like, it'll be a very similar process to what was done in 2015 for those of you who were there for that effort. For the space measurement data, we'll provide a floor plan that we created based on our measurements, along with room numbers, and an Excel sheet that lists all the room numbers and types and use. So an example of a room type would be administration, a room use would be office. And so there's going to be 2 different categories. And then there'll also be major maintenance categories, which weren't done in 2015, but we're adding it in to this work. So we'll also ask that you review those and make sure those appear accurate to what they're being used for. So in the Excel sheet, we'll just ask that you verify that the room type, use, and major maintenance category are correct, as well as the room number. And then for the FCA data, we'll provide the score sheet, which is a PDF fillable format, which is what the assessors will use to collect all of the data in the field. And then along with that, we'll provide an Excel sheet where you can make any comments or questions related to a building element score or any of the notes that were provided. Just as a heads up, we will ask that you don't make any changes to the score sheet itself, as those changes won't be captured. We'll really be looking at any of the comments in the Excel sheet for review. As far as the feedback and the review period, we typically give a 2-week review period, and in the past we have noted that if no response or review comments were given, we will accept the data as is, assuming that the agencies are in agreement. And then after the agency review for this round, it is also the intent to have the State Construction Department project managers also review the data, as they're usually familiar with the facilities as well. So that way, everyone's familiar with the data that's being presented. As schedule, I sent out the finalized schedule for the space measurement and facility condition assessments yesterday. If you didn't get that schedule and you need it, please feel free to reach out to me or somebody else at your agency, State Construction Department, and we'll make sure you get it. As previously mentioned, the space measurement fieldwork is scheduled to start on January 8th, and right now it's currently scheduled to go through January 23rd. We allowed up to February 2nd in case there are any issues related to weather and road closures due to this time of year. And obviously we'll do our best to notify and coordinate any agencies in a timely manner if there are any setbacks due to weather. So we have it scheduled for about 2.5 weeks, but we have up to 3 weeks for the assessments to be completed, or 4 weeks, up to 4 weeks for the assessments to be completed. And then the schedule for the agency review is set at February 20th through March 2nd. So we'll make sure you have the floor plans and the location data by February 20th, and then we'll ask that any comments be returned by March 2nd. And then the schedule for facility condition assessments is set through, or from February 12th through, I believe, February 27th. Again, we allowed up to 4 weeks for any potential weather complications. And again, we'll try and notify the agencies as soon as possible, should that happen. The agency review for the facility condition assessment data is currently set at March 19th through March 30th. All right, so now we can take a little time to go over the methodology review. We would like to review how the space measurements are taken, as well as the methodology for the facility condition assessments. If after this, if you would like to review the details of the space measurement methodology, we will provide a space measurement summary document, which will give a little bit more details onto what types of measurements will be taken in different scenarios. We will also be providing a building systems condition reference guide. The reference guide will give you details on how condition data is collected and how the building systems are scored. After this webinar will make sure that everyone has PDF copies of both the space measurement summary and the reference guide, along with this webinar. Are there any questions so far?
Yes, this is Terry with DLC. I do have one question. When you were going over that everything is going to start, do you have do we have a schedule out yet? Which agencies and the dates you're going to be at those particular agencies, like for Wyoming Department of Corrections, like we did back in 2015?
The schedule was emailed out yesterday. Terry, did you not see that?
No, I haven't seen it, but I was out yesterday, so I'll go back to my emails. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. And for anyone else on the line, if you have not seen that, please check your email. And for whatever reason, if you have not received it and would like to receive it, let us know. If you don't have our contact information, you can go through State Construction Department, through Troy or Charlie to get our contact information. But we want to make sure everybody has that schedule.
So, who did the email? Who generated the email yesterday?
That would have come from Sarah Johnson.
Okay, yeah, I know Sarah. Okay, thank you.
Also, on that note, we were provided a list of contacts for each facility from the State Construction Department. If there's someone on this phone or that you know of that would be an additional point of contact for that facility, please let us know and we'll make sure we're working with them to coordinate going forward. Going into space measurement practices, there's a few things that we really focus on for collecting data for that effort. The first is identifying each space, and one of those things is the room number. In some cases, there are different room numbers on the PDF floor plans that were given than that are used in the facility itself. So we just want to make sure we're collecting whatever room numbering system is being used. If there's not room numbers on each door, we'll try and verify that the room numbers on the plan are what is being used by facility maintenance staff. And in addition to that, we'll associate a room type, use, and major maintenance category with that room number in our Excel sheet data that we're collecting. We'll also be obtaining light level readings, which are being used to for the illumination at each facility. And it's measured in foot candles with a light meter. And the intent is to get a light reading from the center of the space at working level. So we're not trying to get light measure readings from the windows or from the dark corners, but if there's a desk or tables in the facility where people would be working, that is our intent. We'll compare those light readings to a benchmark, and if the light readings are below a benchmark, then we'll take multiple readings throughout the room to try and get an average for that space. And in some cases, we know that people like to work in rooms that are a little bit more dimly lit, and they may not have the lights on all the way. We may ask that if it's okay that we turn the lights on fully to get our readings. And then in some cases, there are either light fixtures that are out or not working, or some people put covers over their lights. And in those cases, if the light reading is below average, we'll make a note of the reason why in our field notes. And the measurements of the interior spaces are taken from interior wall to interior wall, and then for the exterior measurements, it's from exterior corner to exterior corner. Within each interior space, we're not going to measure each column or bump out, but we will measure, or if there's a closet that is not being used for the space that it's associated with, for instance, an office with a locked IT closet, we'll measure the IT closet separately, but if it's a coat closet in an office that's being used by the person who occupies the office, then it'll just be included in that space. And there's a picture that'll clarify that a little bit more. And then after the floor plan measurements have been taken, we will draw the floor plan in two-dimensional AutoCAD. And that will include the room number and a GSF for each interior space, as well as an exterior GSF for each floor of a building. And then once the floor plans are completed, they'll be converted and uploaded into AIM, the state's database, where it'll be associated with the room type and use and location data that was collected. So there's kind of two parts that, when they're uploaded into AIM, join so that the square footage is then joined with the room type and use.
I have a question. This is Terry with DOC on the foot candle measurements. Are you all going to be doing the exterior lighting foot candles as well, and exterior doors where it's required to have lighting there?
No, Terry, our light survey is just interior spaces.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
This slide is an excerpt from the space measurement summary document we referenced that will be available after the webinar. And this figure shows one example of how measurements are taken. So as you can see, measurement 1 and measurement 2 are the length and width of the room. Measurement 3 and 4 measure the cutout for the door. And then the closet space in this scenario is associated with the room use, so we're not classifying it separately. And then neither of the column bump outs in this scenario will be measured. Moving on to the facility condition assessment review. This kind of outlines the process from start to finish. So the first thing is that the state completes the questionnaire, which you guys all did, which we really appreciate. And our FEA assessor will review the questionnaire with the escort on site. And that's where any sort of discrepancies based on what we see and what was reported can be discussed and clarified. And our assessor will update the questionnaire as needed based on any discussions that happen on site. Next, during the field visit, the assessor will identify a cost model, which is how we basically estimate the cost and unit cost for the building systems during our data analysis. While they're on site, they'll also assess the condition of all of the building systems, which we'll get into a little bit later. And they'll fill out the score sheet information based on observations of what was seen on site and any discussions that they have with their agency escort. Back in the office, the assessor will also use the quantities based on the drawings that we create for gross square footage and portions of buildings that may be associated with different building elements. Then they'll also complete their score sheets and will begin to analyze the data. The data analysis is done before we prepare the data to be uploaded into AIM. We'll upload the condition data and the cost data into AIM, and then the facility condition index will be part of our preliminary calculations, but it's also calculated in AIM for the final data. Sorry. This here is the front page of the Building Systems Conditions Reference Guide, And each of the assessors throughout all of our effort will have one of these with them in the field. And so they will be referencing this as they go through the facility for each of the building systems. And this is the document that we'll be providing to all of the agencies for reference. And this is a really helpful document when you're going through your reviews of the facility condition data as well. It'll help provide any sort of clarification or additional information as you go through the condition data we provide. This here shows the table of contents, and it shows how each building will be scored based on substructure, structure, and shell, and each of those are broken down into other building elements. The assessor will be looking at the building systems within the following work breakdown structure, which is based on the ASTM uniformat work breakdown structure that we've used for all of our facility condition assessments. And that is A, substructure, B, structure and shell, C, interiors, D, services, E, equipment and furnishings, F, special construction, G, site, and H, accessibility. And as you can see, each one of those is broken down into additional building elements. This page here will provide a little information about how a building system is scored and what its condition score is. It's going to be a rating from 1 to 5, and that's based on a % of deficiencies allowed for that building system. So for a building system to score a 5, it has to have 0 to 5% deficiencies, and to score a 1, it has to be a greater than 50% deficiencies. So if you're thinking of something like a building exterior wall, if there's one crack or one area that has some cracking, it may still score a 5 if that cracking area is less than 5% of the entire building exterior walls. And then that brings us into local scores of 1 and 2, which is a note that will be made in the assessor's score sheet that identifies areas within a system that may score higher than a 1 or a 2.
I'm going to jump in here. This is Bill. The way that we go through this, the condition is assessed first, just so folks kind of understand how we go through. Once we understand condition based on deficiencies, then we'll look at where it is relative to age. So we look at condition first and then age. Both are considered, but something that is older can be in better condition, so we don't necessarily score just on age. So just so you know, it's condition first and then age second.
And then the second graph on here is related to age and expected useful life. So if an element is in the first half of its useful life, it can score a 5. But even an element that is in excellent condition and it's in the last third of its useful life, the highest it can score is a 3. And so that's the guideline that the assessors will use. So they'll say score is based on condition and useful life. Moving on to the cost models. This is the first page. There's actually 23 cost models that they can choose from. But MO1 is the model for a clear span warehouse, and there's examples of the key model characteristics and possible categories of use. So they'll use one of the 23 cost models for each facility. And then this is an example page of what the assessor will look at to score the scoring criteria for a building element. In this case, it's A1010 standard foundations, and the top part will give examples of what kind of systems are included in this element, as well as the square footage and area to be associated with this building element. And then it'll give what is required to score a 5, a condition of excellent, and then 3, 4, 2, and what is considered failing or in crisis mode. It should be noted that certain elements like concrete foundations and CMU block walls are allowed to be scored a 5 regardless of estimated useful life. And that those are all noted in the reference guide which ones they are. But in this case, foundations can score a 5 even if they are past their estimated useful life. And then this is an example of A1010 standard foundations and the cost ID that will be associated with this building element. So for that ClearSpan warehouse that was M01, the assessor would choose cost ID M01 A1010-01 strip and spread footings for that facility, and that would be linked to our cost models so we would know which unit cost to apply to that facility for the FCI calculations.
Hey, Bill, are you there?
Yes, I am. Go ahead.
So how do we do on concrete? I get it on warehouses and uncovered floors, even with VCT or sheet vinyl. But what if a floor is covered with carpet that doesn't necessarily show any signs of anything? How do you do an assessment there?
Good question. And the way we'll do that is a combination of asking questions and then any evidence we see of differential movement. That's the best we're going to be able to do. If there's any sense of that, then we'll ask more questions and base our scores on the judgment of what we think we've seen or heard from those observations. We're not going to go in and tear up floor finishes or anything like that, Terry. So we're doing our best to learn what we can from the visual observations we make, the information we get from folks on site, and anything we can sense, again, in movement based on just walking the surface of the floor.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Sure.
In some cases, if there is not a cost ID in the reference guide that the assessor thinks meets the requirements of the building, they can request a new cost ID, and that is determined during the data analysis process. And I think that's all of the topics that we had to go over, and now we'll open up to any questions that you may have or additional topics that you would like to discuss.
So Sarah, this is Troy. Can you hear me?
Yep.
One of the questions maybe net to gross and how you figure that and how the net looks at within the condition assessment and the measurements versus the gross.
Sure. For our gross square footage, it's all based on exterior measurements. So it's the outside surfaces of the building. That will essentially create the exterior polyline of the building in AutoCAD, or for those of you who may be familiar with that. It's a closed shape that we can then auto-calculate the square footage from that closed shape. So the closed shape of the exterior surfaces is the gross square footage. The only thing that may be subtracted from gross square footage is if you have clear story areas or something like that that don't occur floor to floor to floor. So those type of openings from floor to floor are taken into account. As far as your net, the net is essentially going to take out the wall thickness and things like that. So we're measuring interior spaces, inside surface to inside surface. So if you think of that, your exterior gross square footage is going to include all of those wall thicknesses and so on. Then when we get the net comes from all of the interior spaces, which will eliminate the thickness of those surface of those wall partitions, whatnot,
and all the open space.
Okay.
So I guess a good for instance would be stair openings or elevators. There's not going to be considered a floor surface at every level for the elevator shaft, and then openings when you scissor through your stairs, those floor surfaces are counted, but not the open spaces. If you have a two-story gymnasium if you have a gymnasium that goes 2 stories in a 2-story building, that only gets counted as a floor surface once, so that won't go into your gross twice. Things like that. So those types of things are taken into account when we net out the net building, the net square footage from the gross square footage.
And then just so everybody knows where we're heading with the database is by probably next fall, we're hoping before the next round of facility plan meetings, measurements of all spaces, I think, have been done in location, but we're going to be identifying the major maintenance categories for each of those spaces, and so that will be within the database, and that's what will generate eventually major maintenance payments, so that we can do that in based upon actual measurements and then use of spaces and major maintenance categorization of each of those spaces. So in the future, we'll have each agency, each entity go through those, and we will go through a confirmation process of each space, make sure we've got, and update those with regards to make sure we've got them labeled correctly and usage, categorized correctly, and then if there's any concerns on the state agency side, we will work with you to resolve any of those and make sure our categorizations are correct. I think there's 7 categories, and let's see if I've got that or not. And Mel, you're more than welcome if you want at all.
I'm trying, I could lumber through them, but I'd rather you pull it up.
Yeah. Let me see if I can find those.
It should be in that one.
Right.
Classroom office, laboratories, libraries.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Since you've been right here. Right? Is that right? I don't think so.
Then we added the additional.
With the major maintenance, with the definition.
Yep.
Go to assessment. Go to condition assessments, the 2017 business or building assessment. Up one.
Up one, yeah.
And then you've got the definition.
Okay, here we go. Yeah, so now in the past, sometimes these categorizations have been applied to an entire building. Now they're going to be applied to a per space. So, for instance, you've got restrooms, you've got hallways, you've got offices, whatever those are. So anyway, basically the 7 categorizations are auditoriums, classrooms/offices, that's one, laboratory, library, support facilities, power plant, and special use. And then I think, and we were talking about one more, didn't we?
There was
For health facilities, hospital.
Yeah, and then the other one is hospital. Now, state statute only allows us to apply 7, so there's actually 8 categories now because we're trying to, obviously different uses of different spaces require different levels of funding for major maintenance. So that's how we're improving this system to make sure we're as accurate as possible for the use of each of your spaces. And then hospital is also an 8th categorization, but that 8th categorization you can only apply, according to state statute, 7 categories. And so one of the other categories would have to be removed out of that list, if that makes sense. Okay, that was a good question. I wanted to go back for just a second, Sarah, to room numbers and make sure that we're all on the same page. Different agencies and different buildings, or whoever the owner is, they have different room numbers, but your room numbers are unique to your system, and you actually have your own room number methodology or whatever, and then you tie the location information to those room numbers. So want to make sure that no one's confused. You may have a room number 74, but that room number is number 3. And what we're trying to do is, because there's so many room number metrics out there of how they're numbering things, and we're being consistent. So FEA will actually assign the room numbers. Those room numbers will not be for your purposes for daily use. It'll be for us tying location information, major maintenance information, square footage information to specific spaces, and linking that to specific numbers on a floor plan. So don't be confused when it comes back and you have different room numbers. There's a reason for that.
Tanner had a couple of
Okay, Tanner, you want to ask a question?
Yeah, but if I may, we are currently at General Services setting up an AIM CMMS maintenance management type software, and so we're going to be able to utilize the polylines like Bill was describing and the room numbers, and so we're going to end up doing a crosswalk on some of those. And also, as we're creating that database, we're also going to be able to modify some. So it's one of those things that I wanted to bring up, that it does present some anomalies in the database, but it can be cleaned out. So just to clarify that. One of the other things that in the past we've done on scoring is that the previous score does not predicate the current scoring. Is that right, Bill or Sarah?
Yeah, no, that's correct.
It doesn't weight it.
Correct. So when we go out, in this case, I don't know that we've assessed these particular buildings. Well, no.
There's a few of them have been assessed, but for the most part, they're going to be first-time assessments.
So in the case where we've assessed a building in the past, what we're trying to do is increase our knowledge of the building this time around, which may or may not end up with a score that's consistent with the past. It will depend on whether or not we've seen changes. So just because something scored a particular score in the past doesn't mean it will score the same for that system in the future, or for the overall building for that matter. So we try to learn from the collective experience of yourselves and what our assessors have seen over time. And the past assessments may inform us of something that was of particular interest or noted in the past that we may look at or ask about, and then it will be scored fresh, if you will, based on current observations and a collection of all that past knowledge.
Okay. Another follow-up on the methodology, and I'm not quite sure on all of the numbering here, but one of the other assessment types that we've done in the past is security assessment, and that is from what I understood, is not included on this go-round, correct?
That is correct. This does not include the security assessments, Tanner.
Okay. Due to the nature of the folks on the phone, they might be interested in that, but not included at this time.
So this is Terry with DOC. Since this is all tied to major maintenance funds and dollars, and we do rely on our security systems to be up to par, so are we one of those 1 to 7 plus 8 special category of buildings, like the health department or hospitals?
Well, wouldn't that be under technology readiness story for Bill?
No, that's a little different, Tanner. I think the question that I'm hearing here, two things I'm hearing in this, if I could. One is you have some special security systems, perhaps in some of these facilities, to the extent that we look at alarms and communications and things like that. That is scored. It's just not assessed from the standpoint of security as an element in and of itself. So in the past, we've done security assessments that are much more detailed than what we'll have here. It doesn't mean that those systems aren't part of a system that's being assessed. It's just not being assessed from a security standpoint. And that gets much more detailed. And if anyone wants to understand what has been done in the past or could be done, we can talk about that separately. But this is not a security assessment from the standpoint of how well the facility is secured by the technology that's in place. Tanner mentioned technology readiness. There are a couple of things that our assessors will be looking at while they're out there that give us a little more knowledge of the facility in what's called a facility condition needs index. So the illumination, the lighting measurements, that's part of that. The technology readiness is part of that, and indoor air quality is part of that. Now, we have methodology for how those things are assessed, and it's based on something that is fairly mechanical in nature. So, for instance, illumination is assessed by measuring foot candles and seeing whether or not that aligns with a benchmark for the type of space that we're measuring. For indoor air quality, what we're really looking at there is the mechanical or natural ventilation in the building to see whether or not you have adequate air exchange and that kind of thing, so that you have the potential of having a compliant indoor air environment. So we're not out there taking samples of air and things like that. We're not looking at collecting mold samples or background mold samples or anything like that. We're just looking at how we can measure potential for complying with air exchange. And then the other is technology readiness. So for technology readiness, what we're really looking at is whether or not the building has sufficient power to be able to support current technology needs. So we're measuring power and looking at power characteristics and then doing some analysis to see whether or not that appears for that facility type, whether or not it appears there's sufficient power to meet your technology needs. So there's a lot of answers to questions that may have not been asked, but a couple of things that have been mentioned here, I thought that I'd clarify some of those other things that we're looking at.
Sir, this is Dan Shin from Department of Corrections. Just so I understood you clearly, there will not be a security audit pertaining to the mechanical equipment of security. However, those security items will be audited, but under a different format. Is that correct?
Yes.
Such as our control center, our perimeter fences, our illumination of our lights, things of that nature.
Correct. And what we are looking at in this case, Dan, is we're looking at the sort of physical condition of those things. Correct. So we're not looking at your perimeter fencing and saying that's adequate for that level of facility.
Security. So, right. I understand. But from a mechanical standpoint, they will be assessed, though, correct? Just under a different category.
That is correct. They will be looked at, assessed for condition.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Okay, just to back up, Bill, I don't think you guys assessed perimeter fencing. You just assessed the building, correct?
No, for state buildings, we actually looked at perimeter fencing.
Okay, interesting.
Under the G category?
So Terry, as you were asking that question, I'm looking at these 7 categories or 8 categories. So, I mean, if it's not an auditorium, classroom, I mean, we have cells and stuff like that. I assume that the majority of those are special use.
Yeah, but I think I don't want to lose track of that 7 and 8 category, because if we add to it too much, we're going to create a mess when we're trying to identify based on RS means how we pull those numbers for major maintenance. Because
right.
the there has to be a category for that. So I think that's a separate conversation. Terry, you and I and maybe Dan Shannon need to sit down and talk about it and get with Tamara, and we'll look at how we put together that major maintenance package and see if there's a way we can identify something in RSMEs that might have an identifier separate for that.
Okay.
Thank you, Mel, because even our sales, there's different construction, different purposes for sale use, for different level of custody and things. So yes, thank you. Yeah, we can do that.
Okay.
And Mel, if I may, to follow up on that, when we get a deferred maintenance number on the assessment, that is a high-level cost model. That's not I'm sure everybody understands that, but you don't want to benchmark that for your budget, for your number of your replacement. Exactly what you were saying there, Mel. So that's a really good, note to say what's your deferred number and what's your real number for your estimate. So one's a cost model, one's a you're going to need to do a detailed estimate. Is that fair to say, Bill, Sarah?
Yeah, actually, that's a good clarification for folks who may not be familiar. The data that you'll get out of this assessment is a great tool to give you relative reference of condition of systems and buildings. But when you dig down into the detail of what it may take to get a particular element of work done, it may not align exactly with the deferred maintenance that you see in this assessment or that pops up in AIM as a result of this assessment. What it will do is it will tell you that the condition of that particular thing, based on its score, is going to give you an indication that it's in good condition, it's in fair condition, or it's in poor condition, or it's in failing condition and need immediate attention. So this is a great tool for drawing attention to areas that need work, and will help you zero in and focus on those rather quickly. And then, like Tanner said, then you will go through your own facility planning and budgeting to determine exactly what it's going to take to address some of those things.
Okay, this is Terry again.
Go ahead, Terry.
Yes, sir, I have one more question back to the MEP segment, and maybe I misunderstood it, but my understanding when it was talking about certain equipment and its useful life, and when it gets into the second, third, it will automatically be a set score. However, what if one goes in and do a refurbishment of that piece of equipment? Does it still only remain a score, a 3 or whatever?
That is a great question, and it is something that we're going to need to learn from you when we are in the field, because we will consider refurbishment as an extension of useful life, Terry. So it won't necessarily mean. So say if you've done a refurbishment and that should get another 20 years, then we would need to understand that so that we don't look at something and say, oh, that looks old. Then it may drive a score down based on its age. We don't want to do that. So for folks in the field that are assisting us, or to the extent that when you're reviewing data and you notice something like that, make sure we understand the work that you've done. That's really important to us. So if you've addressed conditions by a refurbishment, then that could improve the score for a system based on that. It won't necessarily have to be driven to a lower score just based on age if you put that kind of work into it.
So with that, hey Terry, so with that, this is Mel, and for everybody else on the phone, I think this is a great segue to make this comment that shows the importance of whoever is doing the escort really needs to be somebody who understands the facility, who works in the facility, who maintains it, who knows the equipment, and can make those comments to the folks while they're doing their walkthroughs of the facility. It is absolutely important. If you want this document to be a real document, it's important that that's the person who's walking around. It would be shameful if the warden's walking around with somebody when it really should be a maintenance guy or something like that, and vice versa. And the same thing when you start looking at the documents once they get sent back out. make sure the right people are looking at that. Everybody who touches that facility should get an opportunity to look at that document and make their comments before we ever get those documents back for the first time. That way we don't have to keep going back and forth and rehashing things.
Okay, agreed, thank you.
Yeah, and maybe we should, this is Troy, maybe we should add to the fact that when you get these documents back and are looking at the assessment, the scores aren't what you're really truly looking at. You're looking at the notes and the assessment details, okay, that drive the score. We pay a third-party consultant to do the scoring. We include you to see, did we miss something? Did they miss something in the observation that can affect the score? So make sure you don't concentrate so much on the score, you're concentrating on the content that drove the score.
So to that end, thank you, Troy. We try to make some type of comment for everything. You may see some light comments, meaning not very verbose. So they're limited, they're quick and concise for those things that are in good condition or in excellent condition, score 4 or 5. When we get down to 1s and 2s, you're going to see more notes. And that's going to talk about, really like Troy said, why was it scored a 1 and a 2? What did we see? And then a 3 may be a combination of some good things and some bad things, and you'll see comments that may influence that score one way or the other. So the comments are definitely important to look at and see that you don't disagree with anything. Or if certain work has been done that doesn't appear to be reflected in our notes, that's important to make sure we understand. So to Mel's point, yes, the escorts that we have are extremely important to getting the best information we can get. Your reviews are the second level of checking that. And based on that combination of what we see and what we hear from you, what we get back in comments, will impact and influence that final commentary and scoring. So any assistance you can provide will just mean a better product at the end.
This is Ramon at the Wyoming Girls School.
Go ahead, Ramon.
I may have missed it. How much access do we get to AIM?
That would be a good question for the state. I will defer.
Well, I'm retired Navy, and we've been dealing with AIM since 1989, and it's really kind of endless. I mean, I hear guys talk about upkeeps and overhauls on equipment, but all that data can be added to AIM.
Right.
Yeah, all of the condition information that we collect is intended to land in AIM. So from that standpoint, your state agency should have access to all that data. There's a different level of activity, obviously, that you can go to in AIM, and that's what Tanner mentioned earlier about going to a CMMS system in AIM. So if you're familiar with that, you can go to a much greater level of detail. Right now, what we're doing, we'll collect condition data, space data, all of that. It will all end up and land in AIM, so to whomever has access from the agency into AIM will be able to see all of that information and all of that data. In the process that we go through, you won't be seeing the data in AIM yet because we're trying to validate the data before it gets loaded into AIM. So the review process that we go through is outside of AIM very intentionally so that we load the best data we can the first time around.
So in the future, I can eventually add all my annual, quarterly, semi-annual maintenance into AIM, and it'll flag me to tell me it's due, and I'm not sure where you want it other than this building.
Yeah, that will depend on whether or not your agency has the module loaded and implemented to go to that level. So your serialized inventory can certainly go in AIM. If the agency has implemented that module, then you can do exactly what you're saying, and that's the beauty of a tool like that. Right now, what we're doing is going to be a little higher level. It's system level and building level to give you indication of where your conditions are, where your problem areas are, things like that. Maintaining it down at the serialized inventory level is, that would be the best of both worlds if you have both levels of detail. I don't know what agencies have implemented at that level, and as you heard, you can see that Tanner and General Services is going through that implementation now in AIM. So that's that's, if it's not done, that would be a great step to take in the future for those of you who can. If the agency has that already implemented, then yeah, I would certainly encourage that there's a deliberate attempt to get that kind of information at your serialized inventory level.
So Ramon,
and who do I contact for that?
Ramon, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, this is Mel. So the first question is, you guys don't have AIM in your organization now, do you?
I believe the teachers use it, but it's very limited. I don't know what they actually do with it.
Well, we'd have to get with you and see what you have. But as a general statement for everybody on the phone, state construction's mandate has been to make sure that as we're doing building assessments, what else can we do out there to help agencies manage their routine maintenance programs and all that. So I will tell you, we've been having some pretty robust conversations about trying to use AIM as a model around the state for all the state agencies that own buildings and have buildings. And hopefully if we can get that to happen over the next couple of years, we'll be able to do just what you're talking about, Ramon, be able to hopefully build in a system where we may be able to get that CMS module in there so you can use it as a preventive maintenance program and routine maintenance program for your organization. So we're looking at that right now. If you don't have it, we're slowly trying to see how we can push this through the rest of the state, but we're going to have to see whether we can get the funding for that and whether we get support from the legislatures and the elected officials for that. So,
well, I believe we have it, and we need someone to do a pilot program. I'll be glad to help you.
All right. Yeah. Well, that's good to know.
Yeah, and this is Troy again. So one of the things we're doing is you got to walk before you run. Right. And I'll tell you, this stuff is extremely time-consuming. You can ask Tanner about that. And so the first thing we're doing, obviously, last year, this year, is we're making sure we got all the buildings in the database. We have them categorized space by space by space, gross square footage. We've confirmed all the usages. We can start generating major maintenance. And then also our assessments, obviously, these assessments are very important because from those come requests. You prioritize your major maintenance according to condition of systems. Major capital requests going through SBC, I think, are really important to be substantiated and understood. Why are you asking for what you're asking for? How much are you asking for? And when are you asking it? Those are all the things that we're setting up in the foundation of this database. And so, sometimes, from the outside, I just want to make sure we understand this literally does take years. It took us about 8 years on the school facility side to really nail this thing. And we're just now just starting the second year in this. So we're getting there. And, I think that eventually, that's where we want to head. But please be patient, as we've got to do one thing at a time, make sure we do it correctly, and then move on to the next level so that we have a really accurate database that's authoritative and that is the center of accurate data in which all state agencies can be a part of.
Hey, Ramon, this is Tanner. Good to hear from you again. Hey, so what? Just to kind of further clarify, we do not have elements or serialized asset assessments. We only have the building assessment. So to think that we have a score of a 3 on rooftop unit number 7 is we're not there, and that's what Troy was kind of talking about. We're
I understand, sir. I was just, in the shipyard when submarines come in for overhauls, it's all on AIM. I mean, I track everything on AIM, and that's what I like to eventually do on these facilities here is to track everything from down to ordering a gasket.
Okay. I can tell you, just like Troy was talking about, it is staggering the amount of hours in data entry, as you well know. So I guess we need to be careful what we ask for to not get into a paralysis of analysis. But one thing I was going to ask Bill, while it's on my mind, was, are we going to identify localized ones and twos?
Yes, Tanner.
Okay.
So for those of you who have not necessarily caught on to that phrase, what we do when we assess a condition of a system is the score that you see for the system is reflective of the entire thing. So if we take a roof surface, or the roof covering, if you will, that is something that will get scored as a whole. But you may have 4, 5, 6, 7 sections of roofing that may be in various ages and conditions. If we see a portion of something that is in a different condition, a poorer condition, we will note and identify local 1 conditions and local 2 conditions. Those are the failing conditions and the poor conditions. So if you see in the commentary that you receive local conditions, you might see a score of a 4 or a score of a 3 with a local condition in the notes. Those local conditions will begin to highlight areas that we saw that we think are of particular interest, in that those conditions may be poorer than the overall score. So the rooftop unit would be another good example. That rooftop unit may be part of a larger system, and if there's one failed rooftop unit in 5 or 10 in 30, we'll make notes of those local conditions to at least let you know that we noted that there were particular portions of systems that were in poor or failing condition.
Another thought, Billy and I were just over talking. One of the previous assessments was kind of like a stoplight assessment. It was green, yellow, red. Very rudimentary, useful, but this assessment will give us a lot greater detail. So just wanted to say that out loud, and it's a very useful tool. So more information.
Yeah, Tanner, those stoplight reports that was a visual tool to let people kind of see, what was happening in the different systems. That is not the product of AIM. That was just a tool for presentation and review purposes. So all of the data, all of the notes will end up in AIM, and AIM is where you want to focus your attention at the end of the day. So after we get all this data reviewed and loaded into AIM, that's where you're going to operate from. So those other things, anything that you see in the review process, is just a tool for the purposes of presentation and review.
So for the mass users, I guess, I don't know if everyone will have log-on to AIM, but we'll certainly have those reports to be able to, will they, Mel?
Yeah, we already have those in the facility planning process where they can look at their individual systems.
So everyone can log in. Okay, I didn't know.
Yeah,
okay.
And we actually provide that. We actually provide that in a spreadsheet, just like we did for school districts, and then they can see the individual systems and stuff like that.
Not everybody's going to log on to the CPPM right now. I mean, I'm not sure what module you're going to run it out of, but.
Well, and during the facilities plan itself, we had the low condition score spreadsheet on all the buildings and all their scores.
Right, but that was an Excel, not as in an AIM format.
So we're still building that AIM database with that. So, it'll take some time. Okay, this is all for a tool, and I think the other thing that was kind of mentioned, and I know that it was mentioned of, how detailed will we get eventually in this database. When you're looking at appropriations across the state, and recognize that when you're doing assessments and they cost $3 million to do all the buildings for state, and then you go over to the school side and it's $3 more million, that's $6 million. It's hard to justify more than that. So these are great tools, and they give enough detail to help each agency and CM to look at the needs. But it's not down to really the fine points of managing those systems with regard to inventory and stuff. So right now, this is a pretty reasonable way to approach that, and we'll see what the future holds. But again, first things first, we just need to establish a very solid understanding of all the conditions of the building statewide to begin with, and make sure we have them all in the AIM database, and make sure that we are calculating effectively and the major maintenance payments so that your needs are being met. Okay, Bill, I think with that then, I think we've answered a lot of questions beyond what I thought we would, but anything else? Otherwise, we'll kind of shut this down. Thank you for recording this, Bill. Appreciate it. Send us the video, of course, or link to it. And then we're also asking if you can provide the slideshow, and if you can get those to Amber, we'd appreciate that. And then she can send or Sarah, however you guys want to do it, you can send a link out for the video and the slideshow as an attachment. That would be awesome. And we can also put that on the state CM's side of the website. So it'll be on there as well, and we'll offer that as an opportunity for you guys to review, or if there's someone else in your agency that needs to listen to it, we'll provide that as well. But other than that, if there are no other questions, we probably ought to shut down the meeting and end it. But we do thank everybody for your attending. We think this is important, and I think it's very important for accuracy of these assessments in order for these buildings to be and the needs to be met and then shown as well, and to justify requests in the future. Any other questions or comments? Okay, Bill, anything else?
I think that's it from us. Thank you, everybody. We'll close out the meeting, and Troy will make sure that you guys have all the links to everything.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.